The hands give it away first. Not the face. Not the famous voice. The hands. They rest a little longer now before reaching for anything. They hesitate over simple movements, as if the body is asking permission from time itself. The room around him is quiet in the particular way late life becomes quiet. Not peaceful exactly, but thinned out. Fewer calls. Fewer arrivals. Fewer reasons to hurry. Light leans across the afternoon and stays there. He has lived long enough to hear the silence between one life and the next. Dustin Hoffman sits inside that silence now. Not as Ted Kramer. Not as Dorothy Michaels. Not as Raymond Babbitt. Just a man nearing the far edge of his own weather, carrying the accumulated weight of nearly 9 decades, and the private knowledge that the loudest chapters are never the deepest ones. The crowds were real. The applause was real. The awards were real. But none of those things could sit across from him at the end of a hard year. None of them could tell him who he was when the work stopped. Only one woman ever did that. And if you listen closely to the shape of his life, to the way he has spoken about love, divorce, family, work, and the person who steadied him when his own mind would not, one truth keeps rising through the noise. The woman who endured was Lisa. Not as a headline. Not as spectacle. As something far more difficult to hold onto in Hollywood. Constancy. People.com David Sheff. There is something almost unbearable in that realization. Because the great wound in a life like his is not always losing love. Sometimes it is coming frighteningly close to understanding what love is only after everything else has already taken its turn. And there is still more to say about that. More than he ever said cleanly. More than fame ever allowed. Because some truths do not arrive all at once. They seep through the cracks. Year after year. Until silence can no longer carry them. Before the quiet, there was fire. A different America. A different pulse in the blood. Movie screens that felt bigger than buildings. Marquees humming in the dark. Cigarette smoke in theater lobbies. The rustle of coats. The low electric murmur before the lights went down. And then that face. Restless. Intelligent. Unpretty in a way that changed what leading men were allowed to be. When The Graduate broke open the culture, he was not made in the old studio mold. That was the point. He felt like somebody who had slipped past the velvet rope carrying ordinary doubt straight into the center of the frame. Then came Midnight Cowboy. Then the hunted urgency of All the President's Men. Then the raw ache of Kramer versus Kramer, the performance that brought him the Academy Award for Best Actor as the film itself took Best Picture. A few years later, Tootsie carried him into another Best Actor nomination. Then Rain Man gave him a second Oscar. Those roles were not ornaments. They became emotional furniture inside American memory. The Independent Oscars 1980 Oscars 1983 Oscars 1989. At the height of it, the air around him must have felt almost unbreathable. Not because of success alone. Because success can become its own kind of claustrophobia when the person receiving it never fully believes he deserves it. Hoffman admitted later that he had a pattern of turning down extraordinary opportunities, that he had blown chances other actors would have spent a lifetime begging for. He said it was hard for him to allow himself success. Hard for him to step into the full size of what was being offered. That is not arrogance. That is something sadder. A man being pursued by his own gifts and still half trying to hide from them. The Guardian. Even Tootsie, that seemingly buoyant act of comic brilliance, was born out of a more private ache. Turner Classic Movies notes that during Kramer versus Kramer, Hoffman began imagining what it might be like to play a woman on screen. He pushed and shaped that idea for years. When he screen tested as Dorothy, he became so emotionally identified with her that he broke down crying in character at the thought that Dorothy would never have children. Later he said he felt terrible that he would never have that experience, and that nothing like that moment had happened to him in nearly 30 years of acting. TCM. That matters. Because the public saw the control, the technique, the perfectionism, the force of intellect. What they did not always see was how porous he was underneath it. How feeling flooded him. How the roles did not simply pass through him and leave. They lodged. They stayed. His wife would later tell him he carried baggage home from work. He agreed. Not because he became someone else. Because, as he put it, you are just yourself always, and you are messing with yourself. David Sheff. You know that feeling too. Maybe not on a soundstage. Maybe not under Klieg lights. but in the ordinary theater of your own life. The years when the outer world called you successful while some inner part of you remained unconvinced. The years when everybody else could see the shape of your life more clearly than you could. The years when you smiled in public and still drove home with your thoughts pressing against the windshield. That era still lives in your body somewhere. So does his. And beneath all that fire, one quiet fact was waiting for him. Waiting with extraordinary patience. Waiting before the second Oscar. Before the late life wisdom. Before the room grew quiet. Her name was Lisa Gottsagen. Not a passing romance. Not one more famous pairing to feed the machine. Lisa belonged to an older map of his life. Their families knew each other in Los Angeles. His mother was friends with Lisa's grandmother. He even played piano at Lisa's parents' wedding while Lisa's mother was pregnant. He knew her before the mythology hardened around his face. Before the public learned how to say his name with awe. In the family orbit, he was simply Dustin. That may be the most important part. People.com. The numbers sound almost impossible until you remember that life is often stranger than fiction ever dares to be. He was 17 years older. They first met when he was a grown man and she was still a child in the extended circle of family friends. Nothing romantic existed there. Nothing could. Then time did what time does. It took them down separate roads. It put fame on one side and youth on the other. And when they met again in the late 1970s, it was at a funeral. She was 22. He was in the middle of divorcing his first wife, Anne Byrne. People.com. That detail matters too. Because whatever tenderness later bloomed with Lisa did not begin in some golden, uncomplicated season. It began while another bond was breaking open. And Hoffman spoke about that pain with unusual bluntness when reflecting on Kramer versus Kramer, the film he made while his own marriage was dissolving. He called divorce the most painful thing when both people want to cut the bond and cannot. He said you can no longer inhabit the same space and you still love each other. There is nothing worse than that, he said. You feel like you are losing a part of yourself. Because you are. The independent. Read that again in your heart, not just your eyes. You still love each other. There is no cheap melodrama in that sentence. No tabloid thrill. Only the adult knowledge that love does not always leave when a marriage does. Sometimes it remains long after the structure has collapsed. Sometimes it becomes part grief, part guilt, part phantom limb. If Hoffman carried that wound into the years that followed, he would hardly be the first man of his generation to do so. The difference is that his wound had a camera pointed at it while America bought tickets. And then Lisa appears not as rescue, not as fantasy, but as steadiness. She later recalled that first look and said she knew. She said that on their first date they were already talking about marriage, already talking about children. 6, she told him. He answered that he had 2 already, so would 4 be okay? It sounds almost too intimate to repeat. Not because it is flashy, because it is so startlingly plain. 2 people stepping past performance. 2 people speaking in the grammar of a future before the first course has even gone cold. They married in Connecticut on October 12, 1980. They went on to have 4 children together, joining the 2 daughters he already had. People.com. Think about 1980 for a moment. What jacket were you wearing? What song was playing through the radio speaker in your car? Whose hand did you still believe you would be holding 10 years later? 20. 45. That is the year Hoffman married Lisa. The same man who had just lived through one of the most painful emotional dislocations of his life. The same man whose work was touching the raw nerve of American masculinity and family collapse. While audiences watched him embody heartbreak on screen, he was choosing, quietly and for real, the woman who would remain beside him for the next 4.5 decades. Oscars 1980. People.com. And what did that love look like once the marquee lights dimmed? Not grand pronouncements. Not the fever dream of red carpets. Something sturdier. Years later, when Hoffman had grown disenchanted with the parts he was being offered, he told Lisa he was not going to work anymore. 3 or 4 years passed. He missed working. It was Lisa who told him to throw out the old criteria, to stop judging solely by the script, to ask instead whether the director might offer a creative experience, whether the work itself might bring life back into him. He listened. That is not a small thing. Especially for a man as exacting as Dustin Hoffman. especially for a man who had spent decades wrestling his own instincts. David Sheff. He also admitted to years of therapy, admitted that he had demons, admitted that he struggled to allow himself success. Those confessions tell you something important about the marriage. Lisa was not merely the woman in the photographs. She was the witness who had to live beside the private weather system, the self-doubt, the intensity, the baggage he carried home from work. Love, in that kind of life, is not applause. It is endurance with open eyes. The Guardian, David Sheff. And maybe that is the hardest thing to admit when you have spent a lifetime being watched. That the greatest romance was not the most dramatic one. Not the one the public could most easily package. The deepest bond was the person who saw the frightened, striving, brilliant, exasperating human being under all those performances and stayed anyway. No orchestra swells for that. No camera catches the whole cost of it. It simply becomes a life. Now the air is thin again. Quieter than before. By 2026, the world Dustin Hoffman came up in has been hollowed out by time. Gene Hackman, his old friend from the Pasadena Playhouse, the man he once played congas with on the roof while both of them dreamed of being like Brando, is gone. Hoffman's tribute was stripped down to the bone. Powerful, subtle, brilliant, a giant among actors. I miss him already. That is how old age speaks when it is tired of decoration. Not in speeches. In absences. Enemy. So many of the rooms that once defined him have emptied. The collaborators. The rivals. The faces from those immortal frames. Even the audience has changed. Not vanished. Changed. The teenagers who once bought tickets to see him are grandparents now. The young couples who watched Kramer versus Kramer and argued all the way home have aches in their knees and old photographs in drawers they do not open as often as they should. Time did not only move over him. It moved over the people who needed him. And yet Lisa is still there. In public only occasionally. A walk through New York, hand in hand. Wimbledon appearances. A marriage approaching 45 years. Nothing loud about it. Nothing desperate for attention. Just the strange, moving dignity of two people who have outlived the illusions and are still choosing presence. People.com. That may be the loneliest truth about growing old in public. The world keeps reducing your life to the parts it already understands. The famous roles. The trophies. The old clips. But inside the house, inside the marriage, inside the aging body, another reckoning has been taking place. One that asks a harsher question than success ever asked. Who was there when the noise stopped? And we are very close to the answer now. Close enough to feel its warmth. Close enough to feel its cost. Because what remains at the end is almost never the thing the world shouted about most. It is the thing that stayed. So here it is. The one woman he kept returning to, through self-doubt, through divorce, through years of work that bled into home, through the long afterlife of fame, was Lisa Hoffman. Not because life with her was untouched by complication. Not because the past stopped hurting. Not because honesty arrives all at once. But because she became the place where performance was least necessary. The person who could redirect him when he wanted to disappear. The person woven into both the earliest and latest maps of his life. DavidSheffPeople.com. There is something deeply human in that. A man can live loudly and still discover that the truest part of him was kept alive by something quiet. He can win 2 Oscars, carry a nation's memory in his face, and still find that the holiest thing in his life was not triumph. It was recognition. To be known before the costume. To be known after it. To be loved in both conditions. Maybe that is the real price of a fully lived life. You gather applause, scars, children, mistakes, vanished years, roles that outlast the body that played them. But a fully honest life asks for one thing more. It asks that you eventually say who mattered. Not to flatter them. Not to tidy up the ending. Simply because the soul grows tired of pretending that achievement was ever enough. So close your eyes for a moment. Go back to the exact year you first encountered Dustin Hoffman. The first screening. The first poster. The first time that voice, that face, that nervous human electricity entered your life. What were you carrying then? Who were you loving? Who were you losing? What was still possible? If you lived through that era, leave that memory in the comments. Not for nostalgia alone. For witness. For the people who were there when those films were new and life still felt wide open. For the people who understand that remembering is its own kind of love. And for the truth we sometimes learn too late, that the names we carry deepest are the ones that quietly carried us.